Hey mamas, it's Christy. I know my camera, it looks like I'm on an angle. Woo! Because I've got my camera's kind of on a tripod and it's just angled so you can see the whole mat. Because today I'm going to be showing you how to assess for diastasis yourself, okay? It's very simple. It takes a little bit of practice, so I want you to understand how to do it so that when you get somebody else to do it as well, or if you ever go to a doctor's appointment or a physio appointment and they do it, you'll understand what's happening, what are they looking for, what are they doing, and then you can ask questions. It's also a great tool to know how to do yourself because let's face it, if we don't want to spend the money to go to see a physio, we want to know how to be able to do this ourselves. We want to be able to track our progress and see if our diastasis is improving, all these different things, then we need to be empowered with this information so that we can do it ourselves. So that's what I'm going to teach you today. So if you have watched the video from last week, we talked about what is diastasis. We covered all of those things. We talked about why it's super important for you to know about diastasis, how it can affect the way our tummy looks, all this different kind of things. And there was a lot of people in this group that didn't know what diastasis was. So if you haven't watched that video from last Tuesday, please go back and watch it and then come back to this one and then learn how to assess yourself, okay? So we're gonna get started here. It's so cold in my basement today. So I'm in Alberta, Canada. It's cold here. We have tons of snow. And I left the window in my basement open last night because I teach down here at night, so it gets really hot when I have a class going on. So I left the window open last night and it came down today and it was freaking freezing. And so I was just getting a little warm and then I shut the furnace off so you didn't have any background noise. So let's talk about how to assess diastasis, okay? So what I want you to do, and of course you can do this along with me or you can do it afterwards, especially if you're watching the replay, obviously. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna need to lay down on the floor and you're gonna roll up your shirt until your bra strap, and then you're gonna roll your pants down so that your hip bones are exposed, okay? So I want your entire belly exposed and I want your belly or your feet flat on the floor for this, okay? So what we're gonna do first, and what's really important is we talked in the first video about the linea alba, and that's that tissue that goes all the way from our pubic bone up to our sternum, okay? It goes right down the center of our belly, right down the center of our tummy. That's the linea alba. So what we wanna do when we're checking for diastasis, we're not just checking for the size of the gap. We're actually also checking to see how that linea alba tissue feels, okay? Because after, we talked about during pregnancy, that linea alba gets stretched and it thins. And so afterwards, we need to know, how does that tissue feel? Is it squishy? Is it mushy in some spots? Does it feel taut and tense? What does it feel like? Can you press your fingers way down into your belly? Or does it have some resistance and some springiness to it? So I want you to take your fingers and I want you to feel all the way up the midline of your tummy, feeling the tissue and making a mental note. Like for me, I know that down below my belly button is where the tissue is the most spongy or squishy, okay? So in that space between my belly button and my pubic bone, that's where my diastasis is the most squishy. Yes, I have a diastasis. We'll get to that too. And then above, it's really tight and strong and there's really no squishiness to it at all, okay? So once you've done that, I want you to make a mental note or I want you to write it down. Okay, it's always good to have a written description of what you're finding because you're gonna go back to this in a few weeks if you've been training to heal and improve, or not heal, but if you've been training to improve your diastasis, then you wanna make notes so that you know where you were so that you know if you're progressing or not, okay? So once you felt from the top to the bottom with your fingers and you can kind of feel and play around, what I want you to do is I want you to try to find the edge of your six-pack muscles, okay? So you should feel there's gonna be a little dip, okay? There's gonna be a dip somewhere that shows you have six-pack muscles here and six-pack muscles here. There's gonna be a little dip in the middle somewhere, and I want you to feel, and this is where the practice takes in, is getting to know your body, so you can crunch up a little bit to feel the sides, and then try to feel where they're at a little bit. Like I said, it takes practice. And I want you to feel if you can come up with an idea as to how many fingers at rest those abdominals are from each other, okay? So I like to raise my chin a little bit so I can feel my abs come together, and then I relax and I can feel. So at rest, for myself, below my belly button, I'm about 2 to 3 fingers at rest, okay? So we measure our diastasis using our fingers. So I'm about 3 to 2 fingers wide at rest below my belly button. So halfway between my pubic bone and my belly button. Then I'm gonna measure and see if I can feel any gap at rest at my belly button. Okay, so we do 3 different places: below the belly button, at the belly button, so I don't feel any gap there. Maybe a finger. And then we're gonna go right below the sternum, or halfway between the belly button and the sternum, and I don't feel any gap there either, okay? So I really only feel a gap at rest down in this like poochie area, right? This is where a lot of times we talk about having a pooch, or this is where our belly is, you know, this is where it's at. That's where I feel where I have the biggest gap at rest. Then I'm gonna write that down, okay? Then the next step is to see, can we bring our abdominals together? Can we change the size of the gap when we activate our abs or engage our abs? Can we approximate or bring together our 6-pack abdominals? And can we create tension in the tissue between? So if we have a gap, can we allow that tissue in the gap to rise and get stronger when we engage? Or does it still leave a really big gap where we can kind of stick our fingers into our abdominals? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna test again those 3 same spaces. So let's start halfway between my pubic bone and my belly button. I'm gonna take my fingertips. I'm gonna take an inhale, exhale, and I'm gonna curl my chin to my chest just slightly. I don't have to come up all the way here. All I'm doing is tucking my chin into my chest, and I can feel my abdominals come together. So they're approximating, they're coming closer to one another, and I can feel that gap in between my abdominals. It fills with tissue, so it gets hard and taut, so I cannot push my fingers down. I mean, I can, but I have to push pretty hard to get my fingers to go down into my belly between the gap when I'm engaged like this, okay? I have about a 1.5 finger gap on when I'm active. So I go from a 3 finger gap to a 1.5 gap, or 2.5 finger gap to a 1.5 gap. It's always approximate. You're never gonna know totally for sure unless you take a measuring tape and have somebody measure you. But I can approximate on activation or engagement, and I can bring my abs closer together, and I can fill the gap with my linea alba tissue, which is nice and strong. Yay me. So I write that down. Then I'm gonna go up to my belly button, same thing. Take my fingertips, place it in my belly button. I'm gonna press down into my belly button, and then I'm gonna tuck my chin in here, okay? So now I can feel more of a gap actually around my belly button than I was previously. So I can feel that I probably didn't measure quite right when I was at rest. And so I've got about a 2 finger gap at my belly button. And I can try it a couple times. So I've got about a 2 finger gap at my belly button. And again, when I come up, when I curl my chin up, the tissue in my linea alba rises up to meet my fingers so that I don't have a valley in my belly where I can press in really hard. So that's good. Then I'm gonna do point number 3, which is below my sternum. And I'm gonna, again, press my fingers in, curl up, and here I have no gap, maybe a finger, but it's very tight. My abs come right together, and I've got lots of tension here. There's no gap where I could press down in or feel squishy tissue. Everything feels really nice and strong when I activate my abs and I bring them together. So overall, for myself, what I'm learning is that I do have a diastasis, totally fine. I have good tension both at rest and when I activate that tissue up the middle of my tummy. And when I activate, my abs do come together, they approximate, which is what I want. They're strong, they're tight, they work the way they should, and I can create tension and be nice and strong here in my core. That's awesome. So overall for myself, I know that my diastasis, even though I have one, it is functional. It is a strong diastasis. It may have a gap at rest, which is something I'll always have unless I opt in for surgery, but it's something that I can manage. So do I still get that little bit of tummy at the end of the day sometimes? Sometimes, yes. If I'm really stressed around my period or I've had a giant big meal, I might have a little bit of a belly because I have that gap there at the bottom. But my abs are toned, my abs are strong, I can create tension, and so my tummy looks a lot tighter and a lot flatter than say someone that hasn't trained their diastasis and they haven't got any of that muscle tone yet. They haven't built up the tension or the tissue or the integrity of that linea alba down the center. So what this information tells you, so what if maybe you're watching this and you're like, holy shit, I have like a 4-finger gap or a 5-finger gap or a 7-finger gap even. I can't feel my abs, they don't come together, I'm squishy in the middle, my mind is exploding. Take a deep breath. This assessment, this test, there's no pass or fail. It is simply just giving us the information we need to know where we are starting so that we can see where we are going to end up, okay? We can watch our progression. We can manage our progress so we can see if what we're doing is working, okay? If you have a large gap, yes, we are concerned because we don't want it to be any more than 2 fingers, okay? 2 fingers is what's considered a functional or a normal diastasis. Like I said in the original video, there's not a lot of information or research done about diastasis yet. So the terminology surrounding normal, not normal, functional, dysfunctional is very vague, very gray. So I don't want you to read into these words too much. But if you have a gap that's larger than 2 fingers at rest or at when you're active, then we do need to do some work. We need to work on different things like breathing and learning how to approximate the abs closer to one another without sucking in at the belly button, okay? There's a big difference between sucking in and bringing together, okay? So I want you to think about your abdominals like a corset. You want to bring the corset together, not in, okay? So I hope that makes sense. So once you have this assessment and once you know what's going on, then we can take the steps forward to figure out how much work do we need to do? What's happening every week? Are we able to create tension in that linea alba, or are you always able to stick your fingers way down into the tissue, into your belly? A lot of my moms, they come in and they're like, I could stick a whole fist down in my belly and lose my fist in my belly because the muscles are just so, gone that I could just hide a whole fist in my belly. Well, we don't want that. We want you to have nice, strong tissue, especially when you activate it at rest. Obviously, we want to have a little bit of pliability, but when you activate your core and activate your abs, we want to make sure that you have that wonderful tension, that you have that wonderful tightness, right? That's what we're all after. We're after the tone, the tight tummy. That's what we're going for. So over the next few weeks, we're going to talk a little bit more about how to get that tone, how to get that tight tummy. So if you are doing this assessment, and I encourage you to do it, practice it over and over and over and over and over again, because sometimes you're going to get a different result, but you should always get a very similar result. It should never be too far. Like one day you shouldn't get 7 and the next day you get 3, right? You should always have a fairly similar response when you do the assessment, except when you're progressing forward. We want to see that gap get a little bit smaller, and we want to see the tension down the midline get stronger and tougher and tighter, okay? So I want you to go practice that. I want you to ask any questions that you have. It can be a little overwhelming, so I don't want to give you too much today. I want you just to have the tools to be able to assess yourselves. Try it out, ask me any questions, and then of course over the next week we're going to talk a little bit more about it, and then next week I'm going to come on and we're going to talk about how to connect to those abdominals so that we know how to bring them together, how to start approximating them, how to start creating tension in that linea alba without exercise, how to just use our breath and our ability to connect to our muscles to start the progress, okay? So again, if you have any questions, let me know, and I will talk to you guys next Tuesday.